My guest today is one of those special and rare persons who is recognizable by one name. If you say Harley around here, people instantly know you're talking about arguably one of the most famous and influential men ever associated with Knox College. Harley Knosher came to Knox College as its basketball coach in 1960 and retired 40 years later, leaving a lasting and enduring impact on the college and, more importantly, the thousands of individuals he came across. But Harley's 40-year tenure as a coach, athletic director, educator, counselor, mentor, and even a cheerleader didn't. I think you were partly a cheerleader, right, Harley?
Well, you said it.
But that didn't end when he retired in 2000. He continued to be involved with Knox in a variety of ways, and to this day remains a vital part of the Knox community. Ask former players to describe Harley, and you'll hear lots of entertaining stories. But a common theme emerges every time: he changed my life forever. Harley has truly led a life worthy of a movie, but wait, that's been done. We'll talk about that later. Harley is soon to turn 90 years old, even though we kind of prematurely celebrated it on Saturday during the basketball homecoming at Knox. We're honored to have Harley with us today in the WGIL studios. Harley, happy early birthday, and thank you for joining me on Galesburg In Focus.
Well, Jay, thank you for the birthday wishes, but more than that, thanks for the opportunity to be here with you. It's great for me.
Thank you. We can't pass that up. So before we get into the Harley Knosher story, tell us about Saturday. What was the celebration like?
Well, it was wonderful. Basketball homecoming is always lots of fun for me anyway, because it brings back guys from days gone by that, of course, I loved when they were here and still do. So seeing them is great. But in this particular situation, the college made a decision, don't ask me why, to celebrate my birthday as part of basketball homecoming, and it was spectacular. I mean, really, if anyone would have ever told me I was going to have a champagne toast for my birthday, I'd have said, no way.
Yeah, not because of your age, but just surely the number of people you've been associated with. How good are you with names? I mean, do you remember every single person?
Close,
yeah.
Yeah, because, one thing is all the people that played for me, all the teams, I still have the pictures, and when we moved to where we are now, no room in the house, so I have them all up in the garage. So I actually see a lot of those people every day.
Yeah, so maybe did a little homework before you went to...
Well, no.
They probably don't look the same either, do they?
Probably should have. No, they really don't.
Yeah. So how did you end up at Knox College, and did you ever imagine that you would stay as long as you did? Did you think that would be a final stop for you?
No. When I graduated from Miami of Ohio, my coach, Bill Rohr, was hired that same spring to go to Northwestern and said to me in his own inimitable fashion, I think I need loyalty more than I need ability. I'm going to take you with me. Mm-hmm. So I ended up as the freshman coach at Northwestern as my first job out of college. And at the end of the second year, he said, because he had a lot of influence on me and actually still does, I think you're ready if you want to start looking for a job of your own. So I applied to Lake Forest that spring and was kind of in the finals, I think. But the president of that college died at that time, and Coach Rohr's advice was, better not take a job where you don't know who you're going to work for. Mm-hmm. So I dropped out of that. And then little less than a year later, Augustana was at Knox for a track meet, and the Augustana football and track coach was a guy named Ray Leshner, who had been my office mate when he was on Era's staff at Era Parsekin's staff at Northwestern. Mm-hmm. He was visiting with Al Parton, who said to him, for whatever reason, we're looking for a basketball coach. So Ray called me that night and said, I think this would be a good job for you to look into. So I filed an application, and Dean Trevor invited Peg and I down, and we had a wonderful couple of days and went back home and didn't hear a darn thing for quite a while. And then one day the phone rang, and he said, are you still interested in that Knox job? I said, yeah, I really am. He said, well, it's yours. So that's how that went. As far as how long I thought I would stay, our intention was to come here build a record, and head for the big time.
Yeah. So you had a little aspirations to go a little bit bigger time.
Yeah, really did, because, of course, I had been there and saw the excitement and so forth and so on. About the time we tipped off the first game here, I realized the excitement was every bit the same. But seriously, within a year, I knew that was a great situation for me, and that if I could stay, I probably would.
Okay. This is Jay Redfern. I'm talking to Harley Knosher, the former longtime Knox College coach and athletic director. So what was Knox College like when you arrived in 1960?
Jay, maybe the best way I can say it to you is there were 3 of us coaching football. There was 1 of us coaching basketball.
Wow.
1 of us coaching baseball. We had a 4-man staff.
Huh.
And I mean, that Dean Trevor and 4 coaches. But the fact is, we really had a lot to do all day, every day, all year long. And the college itself, in some ways, is exactly the same as it is now, a place where any kid with any kind of incentive or desire to improve himself can have a fabulous experience. That's always stayed the same. But it was much less highly sophisticated, not nearly as well diversified in terms of student body and faculty, but still a wonderful school.
How about so did you start in 1960? That was your first season?
Fall of 60.
Okay. What was your first team like?
First team was a football team of 31 players who hadn't had anything approaching a winning season since 1956, when they had a championship year. And that first year we won 2, lost 4, and tied 2. And I said to Peg, boy, this is awful. And Jay, we won 6 more games in that decade.
Yeah, I know that was a rough decade.
That was a unbelievable stretch of losing football. And yet I can tell you there were people Saturday here from that team who still have a great feeling toward Knox, toward each other, and toward the coaches. I mean, there was an absence of success in terms of winning and losing. There was no absence of success in terms of building relationships and caring about each other.
Okay. So I think you became the athletic director in 1968. Is that something that you were being groomed for, or had aspired to do?
I didn't certainly aspire to it early in my career. As things unfolded and it became clear that Trev was going to wrap it up in the late 60s, it occurred to me that it would be a heck of a deal to be your own boss. So yeah, I was hoping for it, but there wasn't really any way to project myself into it. I just had to hope that would happen.
Okay. So kind of a 2-part question. What makes a good college coach and a good college athletic director?
Well, what makes a good college coach, Jay, is the ability to recruit. That's number 1. Number 2, it's the ability to relate to those kids you do recruit and to stay with the game to the extent that you're able to deal with all of the circumstances that come out game in and game out. Good college athletic director, I think, again, relationships with all the people you work with are critical, but a little different component in terms having to develop a real interest in every sport, every coach, every kid. So you have to really spread yourself out if you're going to do a good job.
Okay. So tell us about the famed Knox-Monmouth rivalry. I've heard you say that it was bitter, life and death, and sometimes maybe not healthy. Was it that way from day one when you arrived at Knox?
In the 60s?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Jay, we did things that embarrass me now when I look back at it. I mean, the intensity that we try to develop in that week leading up to playing Monmouth in football was essentially unhealthy.
Yeah.
If I used that term before, it was correct. I mean, we really, it meant everything. Dean Trevor told me when I came to Knox, in some ways it doesn't matter what your record is, just beat Monmouth. Mm-hmm. And that was so deep in him that it certainly permeated all of us in a very intense way. And the rivalry was incredible. I mean, I think it compared with any of the famous ones that we hear about year in and year out.
Yeah. So did it get you? You know, you said in the '60s it was really intense. It's obviously always been a big rivalry, but did it kind of like change or evolve?
Well, it maintained itself as it was for certainly all the years I was coaching football up until 1984. It still maintained itself, I think, really almost until I retired in 2000. But the fact is they have so completely dominated us since that time that the rivalry is kind of shriveled because there's no real concern on their part as to whether or not they're going to beat us.
Who kind of kept the rivalry going, would you say? Is it the players or the coaches?
I think probably the coaches more than the players, but the players certainly felt it.
Yeah.
You know, it was back in the day, the winner of the Knox Monmouth game, as you know, received a bronze turkey.
Right.
But what you may not know is that turkey was presented at the halftime of whoever won it of the Knox Monmouth game on their court. So the entire football team, when you were fortunate enough to win that game, would go to center court at the halftime of the Knox Monmouth game and with a lot of sensationalism received the bronze turkey.
Yeah.
It was a big deal.
Yeah. And lots of stories of that, of the trophy being stolen, and
Oh,
lots of
and they're all
hijinks with
true.
that
They're
too.
all true. It was wild stuff.
Yeah. So like I mentioned in the open, there's actually a movie or a documentary about you. It's called Win, Lose, Love, and it's very well done. I really encourage people to check it out. But kind of what's behind the name of the movie, Win, Lose, Love?
Well, my philosophy is behind the name of the movie, but what it goes back to, Jay, is that do you remember we used to have Milwaukee Bucks camps every
Right.
summer? Every Thursday night of Bucks camps, I used to give a lecture called How to Win, How to Lose, and How to Love, and endeavor to get those kids to understand that there was more to the game than just playing and winning and losing. And David Anderson, whose father played for me in the early 60s and who came and played for Tim then in the late 80s, was a camper for many years. Always remembered that and became ultimately, a few years ago, president of the K Club. And in that capacity, he just wanted those thoughts to be projected so that others could be exposed to them. And there happened to be a young guy at Knox College by the name of George Anderson who was so talented and so committed. The college supported him, and lo and behold, he put that thing together. And in my view, he did a terrific job.
Right. It's an amazing documentary. And kind of the concept is that you kind of selected your four biggest highlights. Is that correct?
Well, 4 ways how to win.
Okay.
And
How tough was that to narrow it down?
To
to
narrow
4?
it down?
Yeah.
Very tough.
Yeah.
Very tough. In fact, one of the only negative aspects through that whole experience was leaving certain people and certain events out of it who have every reason to believe they should be there.
Okay. This is Jay Redfern. I'm talking to Harley Knosher, longtime former Knox College coach and athletic director. So one of your players, Bob Prussader from the class of '83, quotes you as saying this about players: "You don't have to like them all, but you do have to love them all." Kind of explain that.
Well, what that means, Jay, is that it would be unrealistic to imagine that you're going to look out at a team in football of 60 or 70 guys, in basketball 12 or 15, or whatever sport it is, and say, geez, I really like every one of those guys. Because you don't.
Yeah.
And anyone who says they do is probably giving you a little baloney.
Uh-huh.
But the fact is, my coach taught me, you do have the responsibility to love those guys. In other words, be concerned for their well-being, be sure they have the best experience they can, recognize that they've got a family who thinks they're the biggest thing in the world, and treat them accordingly.
Okay. So I know you're highly competitive. How important were wins and losses to you, and how did you measure success when you were at Knox?
On the day of the game, The
Or
win
both.
or the loss
Yeah.
meant everything.
Yeah.
It meant everything. If it didn't, how in the world would you have the right to ask boys to listen to you?
Yeah.
I mean, if you weren't doing everything you could to win the game, you were didn't belong there. At the same time, I can say to you, win or lose, the most important thing to me was that every kid in our program, the college, and all of our fans felt good about us and the way we were conducting ourselves and making our effort to win the game.
Okay. So you've obviously coached so many great players and worked with a lot of influential educators during your time at Knox. I wish we could talk about them all, but I want you to talk about a couple of them. First, Evan Massey. I know you have helped develop a lot of great coaches, but could you have ever imagined Evan, what he's done during his career?
No.
What did you see in him? What do you remember about him when you coached him? And then
What I remember about him was that he was as cooperative as any human being I've ever known, who was willing to accept whatever role I assigned him and do everything in the world he could to make it pay. I mean, he was an ideal guy to have on your team. I can also remember, and you probably don't know this, Jay, Evan Massey's first coaching job was the women's team at
right,
Knox
he
College.
did tell me that. Yeah,
He did.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad he did because I'm very proud of that.
Uh-huh.
And he did that as a senior, and it was our first year for the return of women's basketball to Knox College. So that was a real big deal. But as far as what he's accomplished, who would ever imagine you could pick anyone and say they're going to be one of three people in the state of Illinois to win 1,000 games?
Yeah. Yeah.
Fabulous.
That's a pretty big deal.
It's impossible.
It is. Yeah, it really is. So the other one I want you to talk about a little bit is Tim Heyman. You coached Tim, and then you named him to be the person to take over the men's basketball program at Knox. What did you see in Tim, and what was his impact on Knox?
Tim's impact on Knox was spectacular. At the time of Tim's death, several weeks later, there was memorial service held in the Knox Gymnasium in Tim's honor, and you could not find a seat. And there were, I was going to say kids, men there from all over the country to pay respects to a guy who meant everything to them. As a player, Tim was as aggressive and nasty and mean as the law allows, and yet a guy you love to have on your team because you know he was going to do everything he could to help you succeed. I coached him in both basketball and baseball, and we became very close. Then when he graduated, we were able to hook him up with the Costa program.
Right.
And he did a nice job there. And when it became clear that there was going to be room for a person to be at Knox and be paid as an assistant coach, there was no other choice. Yeah. I mean, Tim Heyman was as good at the little things of coaching as anyone I've ever known. That guy was a detail man of incredible skill.
Your impact on young people goes beyond the student athletes that you worked with at Knox. You brought this up earlier, but for many years, Knox hosted the Milwaukee Bucks summer basketball camp. There was I think junior high and high school age students.
No, actually younger.
Younger, okay, during the summer. How did that program evolve? I mean, how did it come about?
Well, it came about in kind of an interesting way, Jay. When we used to take football trips to Lawrence or Ripon, we would stop in a town called Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, for a workout during the day we were traveling at a place called the Wayland Military Academy.
Okay.
Director of Athletics at Wayland and I saw each other periodically, actually every year almost, in that circumstance. And several years later, he became the national director of Milwaukee Bucks camps. And when I say national, it's because they made a decision to not just stay in Wisconsin, but to move out at least around the Middle West with their camp program. So it was kind of a natural thing because he knew me, came down to see if we would be interested in hosting a Bucks camp. And let me tell you, that is one of the very best things that ever happened to our program.
Yeah,
That was
I hear so
fabulous.
many of my friends, back in the day that went to that. I mean, kind of explain how that camp worked.
The way that the camp worked was the whole application process was handled out of Milwaukee. So the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts never had to worry about. Ultimately, what would happen is about 3 days before the start of camp, I would get a list of kids already divided into teams by age that were going to be there Sunday. And my job was to be set up to check them in and get them in the dorm and orient them and have a heck of a week.
And obviously it was more than basketball. I mean, that was kind of people, kids' first time of, maybe staying alone,
Absolutely.
So,
listen,
yeah.
I could tell you stories about that you wouldn't believe. But the thing, Jay, the thing that was so fabulous was the people that we were able to bring into Galesburg because of it, coaches and professional players. Let me throw some names out.
Yeah, I was going to say throw some names at it.
Oscar Robertson, Hubie Brown, John McLaughlin. I'm stumbling here because
one I remember was Craig Hodges, who wasn't necessarily a high-profile name, but
he was.
I did interview him. He was a great guy.
He was a great speaker.
Yeah.
Craig did a very good job for us. Tom Borwinkle, the great end who played at Wabash and then was an all-pro out in Seattle. Well, anyway, all kinds. But beyond that, Jay, coaches. I mean, the guys who the Milwaukee would hire and send us as coaches were terrific guys. And then they gave me the opportunity to start bringing some of my friends in, and that made it even better because here comes Evan, here comes Barry Swanson, here comes Chips Giovanni. A week or two in the summer with guys like that, pretty good deal.
Yeah. So our mutual friend and longtime Knox coach Andy Gibbons said that you're the best recruiter he's ever seen, and I know others have said that you had the ability to make a person feel like you were looking at him in the eyes just over the phone. What was your message? Was there a central message when recruiting students?
Yes. My central message was that if you wanted to come to a school where your education was your number one priority, but your sport could be number two and a good, strong number two, and be in a program where the star system was negligible and everyone was important, come to Knox College.
Okay. And how much of a percentage was recruiting in the job, do you think?
Well,
you said it was important, obviously.
Starting in 1984, when I quit coaching football and basketball, it became the job. Because what I started to do was recruit for all the teams we had part-time coaches, and that was 10 teams. And I was still trying to chip in and help Tim and help Randy with the football and basketball, and still recruiting for my golf team. So that was, it was probably 80% of my job then. If you mean what percentage is it for a college coach, I would say it's got to be 50, and maybe you better make it 51,
right?
or the other 49 aren't going to be very important.
Yeah. So you have two grandsons who are coaching. They're at Galesburg High School. I see you have a Galesburg Silver Streaks.
Hey, Silver Streaks pretty big in our family.
They are, yeah. So Chad Thompson's the head varsity coach, and his brother Eric's the assistant. How much and what kind of advice do you give them when it comes to coaching?
The interesting thing about that, Jay, is that they very seldom actually want to pick my brain, and I certainly don't stick my nose in. But the fact is, I had the opportunity, by the grace of God, to coach both of them from the time they were 5 until they got to be freshmen. So every once in a while, I see a little bit of something that might have gone between us in those days.
Yeah. How tough is it watching their games?
Not tough at all.
Not tough. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love the way they coach. I think that they have exactly approached the thing the way they have to, where they are and situation they're in. I love the fact that they work so darn hard, and it means so much to them. And I love the fact that they both get tremendous support from their fiancés. The whole thing is healthy. I mean, it just is. Right now they're struggling, winning and losing wise, but I'll tell you, it's not because there's any lack of effort.
Yeah. So your style, especially as a communicator and a people person, they endured the test of time. But, you started in the 60s. How much is it different, or how much would your career have been different if it wasn't in the 60s and maybe later on?
Well, my career became different when it dawned on me that the thing you really needed to do with every boy you coached is just simply absolutely tell them the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'd have known that in 1960, I'd have been a much better coach. And I'm not sure exactly when it dawned on me that when a guy said, how can I do better? You should say, you got to run faster instead of, well, blah, 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 and trying to not make him feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that element of coaching, of living, made a tremendous difference in my ability to be effective.
How much, as far as, they always say that coaches and teachers have to keep learning. Kind of how did you keep learning during your time?
From the kids that played for me.
Okay.
And from some of the coaches that I worked with. And I mean really, some really important stuff from guys like Bucky Swice,
mm-hmm.
Al Riley, Randy Obrimp, Tim Heyman. Those guys taught me a lot. And I bless them for it.
Okay. So you coached a very successful and dominant golf program for many years at Knox. What did you like about coaching golf?
Well, what I like about coaching golf is it's my favorite thing in the world to do if I'm not with my family. I mean, it's just something I cherish. When I tee it up this spring, it'll be my 82nd year playing golf. So that was number one.
Yeah.
Number two, there's really something to be said for working with guys one man at a time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of fun and entirely different than coaching basketball or football or baseball because it's just the two of you.
Right.
Now, current practice, lots and lots of golf programs are much better organized now. They do group work and so forth, so on. But when I was doing it, it was just one guy at a time and really fun.
So your legacy is really cemented at Knox. You're in the, there's thousands of personal testimonials, and you're in the Knox Lombard Hall of Fame. There's a bust of your likeness. The football field is named after you, the stadium. What would you like your legacy to be at Knox?
Do you know what, Jay? No one's ever asked me that before. Let me think a minute. I would like my legacy at Knox to be the unqualified fact that every kid who played for me mattered to me, and that's the way it ought to be.
That's good. Very good. So I'm going to finish with a little rapid fire round. I'm going to say something, and you give me the first thing that comes to your mind.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Knox College.
A place that has done so much for my family that it's unbelievable.
Monmouth College.
An absolutely total enemy made up of perfectly wonderful people that we should understand better.
Okay. Coach.
Coach Rohr. That's the guy who made my life.
Okay. How about sports hero growing up?
I'm sorry.
Sports hero when you were growing up.
Ooh, boy. That's probably Sam Snead.
Uh-huh. So golf, way back even.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If I wouldn't have been a college coach and athletic director, I would have been
a chiropractor.
Really?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how did that kind of go?
Jay, if you think about it, have you ever been to a chiropractor?
I have, yes.
How would you like to have a job where every day you went to work, you knew you were going to make all kinds of people feel better?
Yeah.
Fabulous. Chiropractic is, in my view, one of the really great occupations imaginable.
Okay. Well, that wraps up my special conversation with Harley Knosher. Harley, the term legend, I know it gets thrown around too much these days, but I can't think of a better or more deserving person to hold that title. You've inspired generations of young men and women and truly are a treasure to Knox College and Galesburg. So thank you for all you've done, and thank you for joining me for Galesburg In Focus.
Jay, it's certainly been a pleasure. Thank you.